What's up, guys? Well, this past weekend we had the release of the first spin-off from the very popular Fast and Furious franchise titled Hobbs Shaw. My review is up on my channel if you haven't already seen it, so you can pause this video, go check that out if you do want to. I have reviews of the Fate of the Furious as well, both spoiler and spoiler-free, even though there's not a ton to spoil in those movies. But nonetheless, this is a franchise that I have kind of an interesting fandom with because I wasn't really on the train right away when it came out. You know, when Fast and Furious came out, I was like maybe early teens. It seemed to be a franchise that all the girls in school really liked because of Paul Walker and Vin Diesel. I wasn't really a part of that. They were cool, they were entertaining for what they were, but I wasn't a gigantic fan of it. It really wasn't until they came back with Fast and Furious, and then especially with Fast 5, that I really started to become a fan of the franchise itself. And since then, I've had a love-hate relationship with the franchise, which I'll get into with this ranking. But now we have, with Hobbs and Shaw, 9 movies in the Fast and the Furious franchise. Would have never expected this franchise to go on that long back when the first one came out, but 9 movies, some of them very different than the others, some of them very similar to the others, and you're gonna have a lot of different opinions out there because people are very passionate, strangely enough, about this franchise, which ones are the best, which ones are the worst. So this is my list. It's not gonna be your list, I can tell you that right now. Just let me know down in the comment section what your list is and why that's your list. But as far as mine, starting off at number 9, I've ranked this franchise before when the Fate of the Furious came out, and this is still, to me, the worst in this franchise, while still being a mildly entertaining movie, and that is Too Fast, Too Furious. The first sequel to the original Fast and the Furious, when Vin Diesel went off to go do other things. You had the introduction of Tyrese Gibson. It's a much more neon movie. It's a much more silly movie. There's a lot more CGI going on. And like I said, it is a dumb, fun type of movie. I can put this on, have a good time, have a few laughs. There is some really good car racing scenes like most of these movies have. So there is a lot of entertainment value here. I just don't think that the dynamic between Paul Walker and Tyrese is nearly as strong as it is when Paul Walker is with Vin Diesel. Although I do like Tyrese as a side character later on in the franchise, I just don't really see him as a guy that can carry a movie. He never really has carried a movie, in my opinion. A lot of the CGI, a lot of the silliness, the neon color, the aesthetic of this movie doesn't really appeal to me as much as some of the other ones, and it's not the most interesting villain in the world with Cole Hauser. So, like I said, mildly entertaining movie, like 2.5 stars out of 5. I could still entertain myself very easily with Too Fast, Too Furious, but as far as these 9 films, this is the one that I will go to the least. Number 8 is also the 8th film in this franchise, and that is The Fate of the Furious. Now, this is the first Fast and the Furious movie without Paul Walker. Furious 7, he died in the middle of production, so we do have some of Paul Walker in that. Some of it was CGI with his brothers. We'll get into that one later on in the list, but The Fate of the Furious had big shoes to fill with the character of Brian not being in it and that dynamic not being there. And the way that they decided to go with this story was to turn Dom into a bad guy. Dom teams up with Charlize Theron, who plays a very good villain. She's like a cyber villain for reasons that you don't find out until later on in the film. And like a lot of the films in the back half of this franchise, this film is extremely over the top to a very stupid degree. Like, this is where the franchise has really pushed itself to where you really got to suspend your disbelief with not only like the stunts and the physics with things, but with The Fate of the Furious, one of the biggest flaws for me with this film is even the storyline needs you to suspend your disbelief. Like, timelines don't add up. The big twist reveal about why Dom has been pulled into this, you know, going against his team doesn't make sense at all. Like, not at all. You really have to just say, okay, I don't care about logic at all, I guess. We'll just go with it to go along with that plot line. Makes no sense whatsoever. Some really dumb stunts as far as the physics of things, like this gigantic car chase where Charlize Theron's character is able to like tap into all the cars in this city and have like this stampede of cars, which begs the question why she can't just take control of the convoy she's trying to crash these cars into. But there's a lot of stupid shit in this movie, but still, on its face value, it can be dumb fun. Like a lot of these movies, you're gonna hear that a lot. It can be dumb fun. There's some cool action here and there. There's some funny one-liners. You still have that family dynamic. You'll hear that word a lot in this franchise. Take a shot every time you hear the word family when you watch these films. You will die of alcohol poisoning. But this movie is just all right to me. This is one where I'm like, I really am not caring about this franchise anymore when The Fate of the Furious came out. So, number 8, Fate of the Furious. Number 7 is going to be the newest edition, Fast and Furious Presents Hobbs and Shaw. If you saw my review, I'm not going to get into all the details, but this movie gives you exactly what you would expect it to give you and exactly what the trailer sells. A big, ridiculous, stupid, fun action movie. The Rock and Jason Statham have great chemistry with each other. They're very fun to watch. There's some really awesome action sequences. There's a ton of action sequences in this. I thought Idris Elba was a great villain. It's shot very well. You got David Leach, who was one of the directors on John Wick, and he directed Deadpool 2, so the guy knows how to direct action. But at the same time, he also tends to falter a bit when it comes to the stuff in between the action, which fails pretty hard in this movie because I lose interest very quickly. Even though there's a ton of action, just the small scenes in between, I actually was struggling to stay awake a little bit. The dialogue, while sometimes can be very funny, sometimes is very, very cringeworthy bad. Almost like a 12-year-old wrote it. I mean, it stands out like a sore thumb in many parts in this film where they say a line, you're like, God damn, that's the best you can come up with? $200-something million, that's the best you can come up with? All right, whatever. This is a movie where you're either gonna love it or hate it. You watch the trailer, you know exactly who you are. You either see it and you say, that looks like a lot of stupid fun, and you will get exactly that, or you watch the trailer and say, that looks fucking ridiculous, and this movie's not gonna change your mind with it. So, good enough time with it. It's a movie that I probably won't rewatch unless I'm doing like a marathon, but I had a good enough time with it, but it does land at number 7 with this franchise. Number 6 is going to be Furious 7. This was the film that had a lot of difficulty. And you know what? As many criticisms as I may have for this film, I will always say it's amazing it turned out as good as it did for all the things that they had to deal with, namely the sudden death of Paul Walker mid-production. They had to finish this film by rewriting and reshooting certain things around the character, giving, kind of adding in a send-off for the character in the final act, using his brothers to kind of CGI extra Paul Walker scenes. And it's kind of heartbreaking. So, when you first saw the movie in the theaters, I'll admit it's heartbreaking to watch sometimes because, there's scenes where they're at a funeral and they're talking about death and you're like, oh God, this is too close to home. The whole scene at the end, while I do contend makes no sense within the story context of the film to have this little, Paul Walker, Vin Diesel parting scene. It's a very heartwarming scene that's like, it's total fan service and it's a very sweet send-off for that character, and it's almost impossible to watch it without tearing up a little bit, as many times as you'll watch the film. But positives, a lot of great action. James Wan is the director of this one, so he kind of came in and took it from Justin Lin, who went on to do Star Trek. He does a very good job of directing. There's a lot of big, epic action sequences. I mean, these movies just get bigger and bigger and bigger. A lot of the good character dynamic is there. I like the addition of Jason Statham as a villain. While I don't think that he's necessarily utilized to his full potential as the villain, he's a very good villain for this franchise, and he definitely gives this whole family a run for their money. On the negative side, very, very over the top and stupid. Again, that's a common theme with a lot of the back half of this franchise. It goes to a point where you're like, okay, whatever, you're fucking jumping across skyscrapers and a little... okay, whatever, we'll go along with it. The story does suffer a bit, which is not their fault. It's because they had to write around the character of Paul Walker. There's things in here that feel like they could have been more epic with the Jason Statham character. He feels like he could have been more of an intimidating villain. He's kind of just the Winter Soldier and just shows up and fucks up the works every once in a while when they're trying to do stuff. Way too many plot lines going on. You got the Jason Statham thing. You have this God's Eye where they're trying to get a hold of that. You got Kurt Russell coming into the mix. Too much going on in this film. And I do think that despite the fact that James Wan does a very good job filming action and doing action films, I thought Aquaman was great, I don't feel him at all in this movie. This feels like every other Fast and the Furious film, which actually was a flaw with the Fate of the Furious as well that I forgot to mention, because you got F. Gary Gray, who's a phenomenal director, and I don't feel him at all in that movie either. They all feel like Fast and the Furious, Justin Lin style movies. So this movie has a template, this franchise has a template, and it does suffer a bit for that. But you can still have fun with Furious 7. It's a decent enough movie. I have enjoyed it every single time that I watched it. It's just not my favorite in the franchise. So number 6 is Furious 7. Number 5 is probably the one that people are going to get angriest about in the comment section, because I most often find this on the bottom 1 or 2 of rankings that I've seen for this franchise. That's Tokyo Drift. This is the only one that does not really kind of feel like part of the franchise. You know, they kind of had to weave around the timeline to fit it in. It doesn't star any of the original stars except for a cameo by Vin Diesel at the very end. It's a story about Lucas Black, who's this regular old high schooler who looks like he's 35, and then he gets sent off to Tokyo to live with his estranged father because he keeps getting in trouble in school. And he finds the local racing scene there and learns how to Tokyo drift and gets involved with the Yakuza Mafia and all this crazy, ridiculous shit that this film franchise is riddled with. But this film really entertains me. I like Lucas Black as an actor. I've always liked him. I loved him in films like Flash and the Disney Channel. I used to watch American Gothic with my dad. He's even in like the opening of the first X-Files film. This guy was a kind of a somewhat big deal in my house in the early 90s. Went away for a long time and then randomly pops up in Fast and Furious, so I like him. I like Han a lot. Han is one of my favorite characters in this franchise. And I will say too, another thing I forgot to say about Fate of the Furious. Why the fuck is Shaw forgiven for that? I digress. Anyway, Tokyo Drift, a lot of good racing scenes, which is what this film franchise started off as. I like the characters. I like the whole dynamic with trying to be the new kid in town, this fish out of water storyline. The way that they film the actual drift racing looks really cool. The villains in this, the whole Yakuza gang, they're not like intimidating to the fact that like, I think that he could just beat the shit out of everybody, but the fact that they're tied to the mafia and people die throughout this movie, it does feel like there's some pliable tension there, and there's definitely some stakes when you get to the final race, and he's literally racing for his life to a degree. So I really enjoyed Tokyo Drift. Yes, it has nothing to do with the rest of the franchise. They kind of had to weave Han into the other movies to justify Tokyo Drift, but on its own, I think it's one of the better movies of this franchise. So number 5 is Tokyo Drift. Number 4 is Fast and Furious 6, or Furious 6 as they put in the title, and they didn't even change it in the home release of it, but Fast and Furious 6. This is coming hot off of the coals of Fast 5, which obviously I haven't gotten to yet, so kind of a fan of that one. And Fast and Furious 6 gets the whole band back together again. They reintroduce Letty as being someone that did not actually die, and she's got like memory loss, so it's kind of about Dom trying to get Letty back, while at the same time they're trying to take down Owen Shaw, who is played by Luke Evans, and that's basically their way to work for The Rock, who was chasing them at the Fast 5, and to get their names cleared and be able to go back to America. So this is kind of like bringing everything full circle with this film. And there is some awesome action in this film. Great racing. I love like the car that Owen Shaw drives. It's kind of got like a ramp to it, so every car that he hits just kind of catapults off of it. The airport sequence, which is ridiculous because they damn near drive halfway across the fucking country, but very cool sequence. There's some deaths that have some good weight to them in this film. I like how a lot of that good dynamic that they really just kind of fired on all cylinders, no pun intended, for Fast 5 does carry over into Fast and Furious 6. A lot of good dialogue, good character interactions. That group dynamic is the best thing about most of these films. As far as the negative side of it, this is where the franchise really just started to get stupid. Like Fast 5 is over the top, and there's definitely some big larger than life sequences in that, but it still has a somewhat grounded feel to it. Fast and Furious 6 is where things really kind of tipped over the edge for me. When you got Vin Diesel like jumping out of his car and flying over the overpass to catch Letty, and there's some sequences like that's just kind of like, okay, and you're pushing it for me. I know a lot of people love this franchise to just get bigger and dumber, and the more ridiculous it is, the more that they love it. I tend to take issue with having to suspend my disbelief that much. Like Fast and Furious 6 onward is where they're basically superheroes. So that's the only flaw that I really have with this film. I still have a blast with it. I love watching it. It's one of the more entertaining films and one of the better shot films in the franchise. I just think it tips over the edge into the stupid just a little bit for me, which is what drops it down to number 4. Number 3 is the first movie that I saw in the theaters, Fast and Furious. This was the comeback film. This was the one after Tokyo Drift where they're getting the band back together. I think on the poster it says like, you know, original parts, new body or something like that, or a new car, original parts, something to that degree. But you get Letty and Jordana Brewster's character, I can't remember her name, and then you get Paul Walker and Vin Diesel all back together. You get the original crew, the original dynamic, and you bring their story back from where it left off in the original film, where Brian is back in the FBI, Vin Diesel's off doing his thing, and Letty basically gets killed off screen, which is the main flaw that I have with this film, is that she's kind of just tossed away, and it's not even really addressed properly in the film. Obviously they had plans for later on, but Vin Diesel and Paul Walker come to a head for mutual reasons under this guy Braga, who's got like this underground racing where they go and they steal shit. So it's a very cool storyline to bring them back together. The group dynamic kind of coming back is awesome. I think the racing scenes are really cool. They don't age as well as 5, 6 onward because they're very kind of GPS focused, and even the scenes in the caves are kind of shot a little bit CGI-ish that you can really tell watching nowadays, but it's a very fun movie. I love the way that it wraps up. It had me totally pumped for wherever they went with the 5th film onward, and they definitely delivered. Negatives, I mean, the villain's not all that interesting. You really don't care about his identity. There's like an identity switch towards the end of the film. You don't really care about their motivations. You don't even really care about solving the murder of Letty at all. Like, there's some things that kind of get revealed later on about Brian's involvement in it, and you're kind of like, all right, whatever. But it's just a fun-ass movie. I have a lot of fun with this because I just love process of elimination. You know what the next 2 are going to be. The dynamic for the 2 above it that's kept very solid in Fast and Furious. Number 2 is the original, The Fast and the Furious, which is funny because this movie was never one of my favorite films, like I've already said. Like, I liked it enough. It's a Point Break ripoff. It doesn't ever acknowledge it, but it wears it on its sleeve throughout the entire film. Every plot point is taken right from Point Break, and I would almost respect them more if they would just acknowledge, like, yeah, it's totally like a Point Break remake, and you're like, all right, pretty damn good Point Break remake. But it's funny because as this franchise has gone onward, you would think because of what my number 1 is going to be that some of the films after that would kind of speak to me a little bit more and be more of the movie that I would want to watch. But, you know, as long as this franchise has gone on and as much as I've grown to love these characters and their family dynamic and everything, I kind of tend to find myself loving the original film more and more as time goes on, because it's kind of where everything originated from. It's where all the, God help me for using this word, lore of the Fast and the Furious franchise, like, you know, calling Brian Buster and the whole rules of the racing world, and, you know, whoever reaches first has to say grace, and all of that stuff that started here that seemed insignificant little, you know, lines of dialogue for an underground racing film that appeals to teenagers and has kind of spun itself into lore for this franchise. You get the origination of all the character dynamics and the relationships between Brian and Dom, and even between Dom and Letty, and Brian and Dom's sister. I still can't remember her fucking name. The racing scenes are really good. I like, you know, I love Point Break to death, so the fact that it kind of borrows a lot of the plot elements for that, it's a good story. So I really enjoy The Fast and the Furious. Is it corny? Yes. Is it a little bit dated? Yes. Is it a much more subdued film than the over-the-top, ridiculous superhero action film that this franchise has gone on to become? Yes, but I still enjoy the hell out of it. And over time, I've just kind of grown to respect that one a lot more and kind of enjoy watching that one more than some of the really ridiculous over-the-top ones. So number 2 for me is The Fast and the Furious. But number 1 is still Fast 5. Now, I don't even think that Fast 5 is just the best film of this franchise, and it's the best film of this franchise by quite a bit. I would contend that Fast 5 is one of the best action films that's been made over the past decade. Fast 5 is the shit. Like, I was not ready for how awesome this movie was gonna be. I liked Fast and Furious a lot. I liked where they left it with, you know, the whole scene where Brian's coming to save Dom from this prison bus, and the movie just cuts off, and you're like, oh shit, what's gonna happen? Fast 5 opens up, and it's almost like an Empire Strikes Back type chapter of this franchise, where there's these things that happen in Fast and Furious. This movie kind of takes it, elevates it all, adds these new dynamics, the biggest one being, not only because of his size, but also because of his presence in the film, Dwayne Johnson as kind of an antagonist for most of this film. And this is the best that this franchise has ever utilized the character of Luke Hobbs, because he's kind of turned into kind of a ridiculous caricature. But in this film, he was actually intimidating. You were like, oh shit, this dude is gonna fuck these guys up. You have this whole buildup of this rivalry and this eventual brawl between Dom and Luke Hobbs. A great fight scene, like one of the best fight scenes I've seen in a very, very long time when they finally do come to a head. A lot of great racing scenes. It comes more of a heist film in this one, and there's a lot of great action scenes regarding that, and a lot of kind of really good writing around like how they're able to switcheroo certain things and kind of keep things from the audience and keep things from the people they're trying to rob. There's a nice little small twists and turns and reveals like most caper or heist films do have in the third act, where they kind of show like, oh, this was going on the whole time and he didn't realize it, so they're actually smart as fuck. A lot of great things story-wise happen between these characters, and kind of bringing back characters from the first film that you never expected to see again and utilizing them in a very good emotional way. This film is damn near a flawless action film to me. Is it a little over the top? Yes. The whole safe thing, nobody ever getting killed. Like, them doing that, they would kill innocent people the entire time they were driving the safe around, but you don't care. It's one of those movies. This is the perfect mix to me of grounded and stupid. Like, this is where they nailed it. This is where it's just over the top enough to be awesome and exciting and be like larger than life, but it's just grounded enough to not make me go, what the fuck, really? So Fast 5 to me is huge shoes to fill if any film in this franchise is ever gonna top it, and I don't think it ever will, and one of my favorite action films of all time. So that's it, guys. That is my ranking of the Fast and the Furious franchise. A lot of different opinions out there, like I already said, so post your ranking down below. Let me know what your thoughts are on this franchise. Do you love it? Do you hate it? Which of these movies do you enjoy? Which ones do you despise, and why? Give me some reasons. Don't just list movies, because that's very boring to scroll through. Give me some reasons why, and we will talk about it. Please like and share this video. Hit that subscribe button if you're not already a subscriber. If you guys want to check out some social media links, please check out Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter down in the video description below, as well as my Teespring store just below that. You can scroll down, probably see it right now. It's a nice little shelf down here. It's got all of my merchandise designed by the great Woody Bowen. Been getting a lot of really good t-shirt sales since I have moved to Teespring, so it seems like you guys have liked this a lot. There's a lot of cool designs. There's an Evil Dead design. There's a couple of Chucky designs, so check that stuff out down below, guys, please. And also, my Patreon page link is also in the video description below, so check that out. It's a great way to give back to this channel, help this channel grow, and get cool exclusive content for your eyes only if you decide to become a patron. So check all that out, guys. And if you want to check out some more of my videos, including past rankings and reviews of the Fast and the Furious franchise, you can check that out by clicking right over here.